After that, Han Yan said that by the time she returned, that guy would probably already be preparing for the general guard training, so it will still be useful for him. Another girl asked who she thought this talisman was for and thought it was for her friend. The second girl was surprised and asked not to talk nonsense, because she thought it was for her. Immediately, someone watching the girls told the masters to wait. Han realized that this was the lord of this city and asked how she could help. Lin Tanru is the lord of Binyan City. He said that she had just left the auction and did not understand why she had to leave so hastily. There are many other treasures in their city. Han just walked past him and said she wasn't interested in other treasures. The lord of the city can return. The man was surprised by her pressure and asked her to wait again. He followed them and said that the jade talisman she had acquired was intended for one of their students. It just so happened that he had brought a bottle of jade dew with him so he could offer. Immediately, the girls took out their swords and put them to Lin Tianru's throat for getting too close. The girls asked him to stop because they don't want to do it. Then they left, and Lin noted that even her students were so valiant. Immediately, someone put his hand on Lin's shoulder and asked what he was staring at, because they had already left a long time ago. Lin saw the guy in front of him and asked what he was doing here and why he wasn't at the auction. The guy replied, "What should I do there? There are no more of these lovely fairies at the auction." Lin asked what he was hinting at. He just decided to see them off. His friend noted that they had known each other for years. He had noticed long ago that Lin was staring at Ms. Guang Han. Lin Tianru was surprised and replied that he just admired her. The guy noted that he had heard that she was not interested in men at all. Lin will have to try hard if he wants to win her favor. When he left, he said it was time to return to the auction. He shouldn't stay too long either. Lin thought about his words that Guan Han was not interested in men. After that, we are shown the Infinity Palace, the sect of the starry inquirer of the sky. After that, we are shown how the girl greeted Master Zhang. He asked if his younger brother had come out yet. The girl replied in denial and said that the protagonist has been in seclusion for a month. Zhang turned around and understood her. Then he decided to eat it another time. Immediately, large rays appeared from the building, from which he looked away. Zhang smiled and realized that the protagonist had finished after all. Zhang went to the door and the protagonist told him that he could enter. Zhang decided to act and entered. When he entered, he saw a certain energy. Zhang laughed and agreed to fight. Immediately, he recreated the blow of the Almighty and prepared to strike. He struck with great force and the auras collided. Zhang then noted that this protagonist is not bad. It seems to him that he was still able to break through to the 7th stage of the Kai cultivation stage. The protagonist came forward and noted that the elder brother was so strong that with one blow he dispelled all the aura of the sword that he had released. Zhang laughed and noted that the protagonist had also become much stronger. Now that he sees the result of his efforts, he is much less worried about the upcoming general guard training. The protagonist was surprised by the words about the general training of the guards. Zhang said that this was one of the rules of their sect. All students who have reached the 7th stage of the Kai cultivation stage are sent to general training as guards. This is necessary in order for him to gain real experience. It's just that he stayed in seclusion until he broke through to the 7th step, so he didn't have time to talk to him. He held out his hand and said it was his license plate. It was delivered to him a month ago. He dropped it and added that the protagonist should remember that this training is full of surprises. He needs to always be on his guard. And if there are difficulties, he should definitely contact him using this sign. The protagonist looked at the number and thanked Zhang. Zhang then turned away and Zio asked if he wanted to tell him something. Zhang said that Myo King has been working on the foundation stage lately, and Master and Mistress want her to break through as soon as possible, so she probably won't have the opportunity to see him off. The protagonist should not be offended by her. Zio replied that Zhang should not worry, because he understands everything. Zhang clenched his fists and said, "I'm glad to hear that. Then he should return to his duties, and he will go." Immediately, Zhang flew out of the building and flew away like a flash. The protagonist turned away and said that Zhang had left and she could come out. Myo immediately appeared from the ceiling and noted that even her older brother could not find her and asked how he did it. The protagonist threw her an apple and asked in response if she really thought he hadn't noticed her. You quickly landed on the floor and grabbed the apple thrown at her. Myo bit it off and asked what he was talking about. The protagonist reached for another apple and answered her so that she would think for herself. He wouldn't have talked about it if he hadn't noticed her from the very beginning. The fact that he didn't tell her anything only means that she is here with the permission of the master and mistress. That is, the words that she would not be able to see him off were a lie and asked if she understood. Myo was surprised and noted that people are so complicated and asked why put some secret meaning into ordinary words. The protagonist was confused and in response asked if she really thinks that all the people around are as straightforward as she is. The girl said that she initially wanted to go with him to this guard training, but as it turned out, her parents were watching her too closely, so all she can do is stay here and keep training. She held out her hand and added that it was from his mother and father. Immediately, a flash appeared from it, and then a certain glow appeared in the air. Her father handed him a sword with the attribute of fire. It has amazing killing power and can be used as a magic weapon for flying. And this is from my mother, the Fire Raven formation. As long as there is spiritual power in it, even a master at the foundation stage will not break through it. His older brothers and sisters had prepared everything else for him. He'll see what's in there later. The protagonist took the bag and noted that it was all too expensive and asked if they had said anything else. The girl replied that firstly, her parents told him not to get into trouble and take care of himself. The protagonist laughed and asked what was the second thing. Mio said that secondly, if he does get into trouble, then in no case should he lose. He must be merciless to those who dared to attack him, beat them up so that they wouldn't even think about doing it again. The protagonist smiled and told her to tell the master and mistress that he would not let them down. Mio, leaving the house, said that she would go first and that they would see each other again. The protagonist reminded her not to forget to thank her parents for him. He originally planned to enter the floating snowflake palace to lead a carefree life, but now it seems to him that the Palace of Infinity, it's not such a bad place after all. I need to think about it again. He was wondering how Liu Hanyan was doing there. He hadn't seen her since she saved his life. After that, we are shown the Jingguang sect. Someone laughed and said that Lady Guanghan was truly worthy of the title of Grand Master of the Starry Sky Inquirer sect. He is delighted. Han replied that he overestimated her. She hopes that they will be able to settle all these issues together. The man replied with his consent and that they had agreed. He also asked if she would like to stay with them for a while. The girl replied in denial, because now they have a lot of important things to do. They will return to them a little later. The man bowed and replied that in that case it was time for them to say goodbye. Yihan and her bodyguards turned around and left. Immediately, the man told Mingguang to tell the others to close the gates of their sect. The guy was surprised and asked if he hadn't told the master of the Starry Sky Inquirer sect that he would help them. The man replied that whether they were devilish sects or righteous sects, they all want to drag them, the neutral sects, to their side. But he doesn't want to get involved in their dirty business, so Ming has to do as he says, and he bowed and agreed with the master. At the same time, Han and her girls left the building. The master turned to the bodyguard and asked how many more sects needed to be visited. The girl replied that they had 3 more sects to visit. Han Yan said she didn't think they would be able to really enlist their support. These were just ordinary promises. Well, she just wanted to get it over with. Immediately, someone showed up and said that they had met Han again. A certain guy changed into a women's suit and said that he had heard that they were not interested in men, so he changed his appearance a little and asked how she was. All 3 girls were very surprised and even a little shocked. Han told them to run and rush to escape. 2 guys were sitting at a table, and the first one said that he had heard that they had been doing well lately. Another replied that they, Squad A, had recently hunted the demonic time of the 9th stage of the Kai cultivation stage. They got a lot of points for it. Immediately, they noticed that Tang Pei from the B squad was coming. He didn't understand why he had such a sour expression. Did they give out some kind of bad assignment? He had heard that there were not enough people in his squad, as one of the true disciples had still not shown up. That's why he walks around angry. They did not envy this true disciple, who would be the target of Tai Pei's wrath. Tai went to the door of the B squad. After thinking about it, he decided to act and opened it. When he entered the room, he saw a table where 3 people were sitting. The guy at the table asked what task their squad had been given this time. Tai replied that they had been assigned to guard the Tian River. The disciple of the sect of the Starry Sky Inquirer, Lin Smi, was surprised at his words. She thought that the local animals had become much more aggressive than usual lately. A disciple of the sect of the Starry Sky Inquirer, Zhu Ming, thought that everything was clear. At this time, their sect is collecting blue-eyed fish to make elixirs, and the animals feel this and become more vigilant and aggressive. Lai Fang got angry and slammed his fist on the table, saying that this coward never showed up. How can they patrol at Tian when there are only 5 of them? Immediately, someone appeared who apologized for being late. It was the protagonist who asked if this was Squad I. He introduced himself to them and told them that he had come here to join them during the General Guard training. Tai turned around and asked if it was Xiao Feng and added that he was a whole month late. He demands an explanation. The protagonist replied that he was busy with his cultivation, as he felt that he would soon break through to the 7th stage of the Kai cultivation stage. Therefore, he had to go into seclusion and skip a month of guard training. Lai Fan smiled maliciously and asked about the 7th stage of Kai cultivation. He went into seclusion for a whole month to break through to the 7th stage of Kai cultivation. So, he hasn't even moved on to the stage of laying the foundations yet. He also has the courage to come here a month later and use such a pathetic excuse. He takes them for fools. Although this was to be expected from a disciple of the Infinity Palace. Immediately, the protagonist got angry and wanted to hit Lai Fan. He hit him, but Lai Fan managed to block him. but Lai Fan still flew far away against the wall. After a moment, the protagonist rushed forward and flew at him. Lai Fan was scared and asked what he was doing. Lin Mai and Zhu Ming were as surprised as possible. Immediately, the protagonist's fist stopped near Lai Fan's face. It turned out that Tai stopped the protagonist's punch and asked if he really didn't care about the rules that forbid harming his comrades. Xiao Feng was angry and asked in response what rules he was talking about, because he had just insulted his master and their entire palace, and added whether Tai was deaf. Lai Fan asked them to calm down, because they are all in the same boat, so they should not quarrel with each other. The protagonist pushed Tai's hand away and said she was right. He explained to Lai Fan that he didn't have a very good tongue, so he shouldn't hold a grudge against him if he accidentally insulted him, and Lai Fan noted that he would remember it. Tai said afterwards that there were now 6 of them with Xiao Feng. Since the Tian River has 4 tributaries, they will have to split into 4 groups. Lin Mai and Zhu Ming, they will be in the same group. Lai Fan will be in a group with Lin Sixi. Tai added that he thinks Xiao Feng is strong enough to patrol alone. He will be the 3rd and 4th group, and asked if he would mind. The protagonist replied that he didn't care. Immediately, Lin Sissy said she objected. She didn't want to be in a group with Brother Xiao. Lai Fan asked the girl not to think that he was some kind of weakling. It's just that he was attacked too suddenly, and he didn't have time to use the techniques. She knew that even though Lai wasn't that handsome and wasn't strong in close combat, he could put up a decent fight if he prepared well. Lai Fan was simply shocked by her words. Tai noted that if that's what she wants, then so be it. She would be in the same group with Xiao Feng, and Lai felt sad about it. If there are no more objections, then they proceed, and everyone agreed and went to the exit. After that, they show us the beautiful blue water. The 2 of them were flying on a sword, and the protagonist asked Sissa why she wanted to team up with him. The girl replied that Li was too ugly, and she wanted to find herself some handsome guy. The protagonist looked at her with a smile and laughed, because her words are like honey to his ears. Sissy then added that she had heard that he, the Xiao brothers, was the most incompetent of all the true disciples of the last decades. Then she asked if he would be offended that she had said that. The protagonist was upset and noted that it was amazing that such a person was hiding inside this cute girl. It's hard to believe that she was able to live up to her age. Lin Sissy, the owner of the B-rank spiritual water route, is a true disciple of the Wind Palace. Her older brothers and sister quickly fell in love with her for her sweet appearance and gentle nature. At least they liked her until she opened her mouth. Sis greeted the master and the elder brother, who had just appeared. She asked him if his older sister rejected him again. This is the 15th time, and does she really dislike him so much? The older one got hit right in the heart and asked the younger one to stop. Then Sissy turned to the master and noted that he was getting less and less hair, and asked if it was because he was old. And the master was angry and shocked. After Sissa told the protagonist that when the general training of the guards began, the master and the older brothers sent her here in a hurry and with great joy. She laughed and added that they didn't hesitate for a second. The protagonist turned around and noted that this was really too much. She had only told them the truth. They had been too cruel to her. Sis noted that this was true. And the master also said that she needed to learn to be a little more restrained during battles with demonic beasts. At least she doesn't think she has a problem with it. The protagonist was surprised by the words more restrained and asked what she meant. At the same time, something was watching the protagonist and Sis. Immediately, the protagonist looked ahead and was surprised. He saw a frog in front of him, and Xiao noted that it was just a low-ranking beast. Then he looked back and saw that Sis was trembling and asked what was wrong with her. The girl screamed violently that there was a demonic beast, that the water had already begun to fly away from them. Her scream was so loud that the protagonist had to cover his ears. She quickly began throwing water in all directions and shouted for this beast to die. The protagonist evaded her technique and asked her to calm down, because she would also ruin him. The girl got angry and said that all the demonic beasts should die. She launched a large wave of water at the monster. A moment later, the toads died and flew away. Then she finished and decided to catch her breath. After she came to her senses, she began to quickly turn her head, because she was at a loss where the protagonist had gone. Immediately, he landed behind her and noted that he was here. The girl ran up to him and grabbed his hand and began to cry, saying that this demonic beast had scared her so much. They are very scary in her opinion. The protagonist was a little angry and asked if she was sure it was fear. Xiao thought that the e-girl, even though she was scared, was able to use a rather powerful technique with such ease. Sis continued to cry and complain about the monsters while hugging the protagonist. The same one kept thinking that using such a technique against one low-ranked beast was a waste of strength. The protagonist moved away from her a little and said that she should stop shaking. He had already been to these places. He does not think that they will meet demonic beasts again along the way. Sissy asked if it was true. A moment later, the turtle beast came out. There were a huge number of them and they surrounded the protagonist and the sis. Zio noted that they seemed to have entered the lair of demonic beasts. Immediately, she started using techniques and shouted for them to die. After they were attacked by demonic worms, and the protagonist noted that he was wrong again. But the girl was no longer afraid, but simply killed them with rage. After that, the protagonist saw a cut snake and took something out of its body. He said she handled everything pretty quickly. At this rate, they will soon be done with patrolling them. That's how to use the power of your younger ones. Sis turned to the protagonist, because he said that they would soon reach a safe place and she did not understand when. The protagonist put his hand on her head and asked her not to worry, because everything will end soon, and she has to be patient a little more. Then he looked back and saw a shadow under the water and thought that there were still demonic beasts under the water. After that, he saw shadows under the water from all sides, which were heading straight towards Zio and Sisu. Immediately, the protagonist grabbed the girl by the arm and shouted for her to run. At that time, something big appeared from under the water. Zio and Sis were surprised and the girl asked what it was. It was a demonic beast at the stage of laying the foundations, the Tanlo crocodile. The protagonist got angry when he saw the beast at the stage of laying the foundations. The girl was scared and asked how the demonic beast turned out to be here at the stage of laying the foundations. She did not understand what to do with them. The protagonist replied that they needed to run. They shouldn't get into a fight with this big guy. It's better to call for reinforcements. The pair quickly began to fly away, but the beast did not want to let them go and decided to use some kind of technique. Immediately, water whirlpools rose, and the beast sent a red ray into them. The protagonist pushed the girl away and told her to take care and got into a whirlpool. The girl was in shock, and Zio asked her not to stop and just run. The protagonist was able to dodge the beam of the beast at the last moment. Then he called for burning cards and a strong explosion occurred. The protagonist stood on his sword and flew to thank his elders for their wonderful gifts. But he had to spend a bunch of talismans to create water whirlwinds and save himself and Sissa. At the same time, the beast was still trying to hit the protagonist, and Sissy got into a whirlpool and screamed. Zio took out another talisman and realized that the crocodile was arrogant. He told the map to fly and dropped it. After that, he quickly flew up to the girl, and the beast tried to suck her in. Sis was surprised when she saw the protagonist who swam up to her. A moment later, the crocodile swallowed the two of them, and then he began to dive under the water. The girl began to wake up and did not understand what had happened to her. She sat up and called Zio Feng. The protagonist appeared next to her and asked if she had woken up. The protagonist created a shield and noted that as she sees. They landed in the stomach of that big guy, and now he is diligently trying to digest them with his acid. Sissy was surprised and asked what they should do. The protagonist thought for a while, and then laughed and replied that first of all she would have to change her clothes. The girl was scared and covered her body. She replied that she had not brought a change of clothes with her. The protagonist gave her his cloak and told her she could wear it until they got out of here. Sissy asked how it would help them get out of here. Zio Feng replied that he had already called for reinforcements for them, and this formation would protect them from stomach acid. All they can do is wait for a convenient opportunity. Immediately, the girl paid attention to the shield and asked what kind of formation it was, because it was very powerful. The protagonist replied that this formation was given to him by his master as a true disciple. He asked if her master hadn't given her something that could have saved her life in an emergency. The girl didn't know what to say. The protagonist apologized and noted that he shouldn't have asked such a thing. After that, we are shown two flashes that flew at great speed. They were Zhu Ming and Lin Mai. The girl noted that it was from here that the mascot was released. Zhu added that he feels strong fluctuations of spiritual energy here. They must have been fighting some kind of demonic beast. The blonde man noted that they should be careful not to scare off the monster. Lin Mai, at the same time, began to create a huge fireball, which scared Zhu. He asked her to hold her horses. Immediately, she fired this fire directly into the water. This ability hit right on the huge crocodile. The girl was scared and asked her brother why everything was shaking so much. The protagonist asked her not to panic. He thought that apparently someone had come to their aid, so the crocodile started up. The girl asked again and was delighted to think that these were their brothers and sister. The protagonist thought that this might be the case, but it seems to him that something is wrong here. They were shaking too much. Zio told the girl to sit closer to him, because they made this guy very angry, and the girl agreed and hugged him. Zhu Ming asked the girl what she was doing, because he asked her to be quiet. Lin Mai asked what he was worried about. There are two of them. Nothing serious will happen. Immediately, the crocodile got out of the water and Zhu Ming realized that it was a demonic beast at the stage of laying the foundations, and the girl realized that it would not be easy. She managed to shout at him to be careful, because the crocodile is attacking. Immediately, his stomach started to hurt a lot. The crocodile rolled over and fell on its back. Zio started shouting to see if there was anyone outside. Lin Mai realized that it was Brother Zio's voice. Zhu Ming asked if this beast had swallowed them up. The protagonist agreed. He and the younger Lin are now in the stomach of this crocodile, but its skin turned out to be too strong, and they cannot get out. They need their help. The crocodile stood up and Zio shouted that he would help them by interrupting his attacks from the inside. Lin Mai understood him and shouted at Zhu Ming. He understood her without words and also began to use his technique. At this time, the beast opened its mouth and began to create something. Immediately, the protagonist hit the beast from the inside, which shocked the crocodile. Lin and Zhu realized that they needed to act now and put their techniques into it. Zhu then asked if they had won. The girl replied in denial, because the crocodile is attacking again. The beast tried to hit them with its tail, but two swords stopped its attack. It was Tai Pei and Lai Fan, and Zhu and Lin were delighted when they saw them. Tai asked how they managed to stumble upon such a huge demonic beast. Zhu replied that they had only come to Zio and Lin's aid. They were swallowed by this beast, but they are still holding on. They need to hurry up. Lai Fan started to get angry and thought it was ridiculous, because it was just a beast of the foundation stage. He felt that this Zio Feng was so weak that he couldn't even protect the girl from such a thing. Tai told them to get ready to create a formation. Lai Fan was surprised and asked the captain if he believed them. Tai replied that they could still try to save them and he should not forget that there was a younger sis inside this monster now. Lai Fan was angry and pointed out that it was all that damn Zio Feng's fault. Immediately, Tai ordered everyone to create a formation and a large seal appeared in the sky. The first one was Lin Mu, she used Shayan. The second was Zhu Ming Shaiyang. The third is Lai Fan Tayan. Tai turned to the protagonist and said that if he had any idea how to get out of there, then he should use it right now. The protagonist realized that they were using the four-elephant formation, which was not bad at all. Zio Feng said that he needed Sis to help him a little. The girl was surprised and asked what she needed to do. Zio smiled and asked her not to worry, because that's exactly what he needed. All four of them used the deadly four-elephant formation around the crocodile. The protagonist noted that the spiritual forces of fire and water do not mix, but if they still try to mix them, then a boom will occur. Immediately, the crocodile began to explode from the inside. After that, the crocodile stopped and seemed to calm down. Saw bubbles and the movement of water behind him and realized that they were there. Immediately, the protagonist, holding Sis in his arms, jumped out of the water. Lai Fan wondered why the protagonist's clothes were on and how dare he hug her like that. When the protagonist flew up to them, Sis started screaming for Zio to let her go faster, and Fan was angry. The protagonist noted that this was not what they thought, and Lai Fan became even more angry. The girl explained that her clothes had been destroyed by a demonic beast, so Zio lent her his. Lin immediately flew up to him and noted that Zio was not bad. She could help him with his training after they get back. The protagonist thanked her for the offer, but replied that it was not necessary. For now, he wants to focus on his cultivation. Lin was surprised. She did not expect that he would prefer a girl with fish brains, and Sis was a little angry. Lai Fan, still angry, pointed out that it was just a demonic beast of the foundation stage. He decided to fly up to the crocodile and added that if he had come earlier, he would have dealt with him in a moment. Lai Fan kicked him and said it was all his fault. Immediately, the crocodile opened its eyes, which glowed with a red glow. Zhu immediately shouted to Fan to be careful, because he realized that the demonic beast was still alive. He immediately began to inflate and prepare to explode. Tai thought that was a problem, because he was going to explode. They rather need to create a defensive formation. Lin said they were too close to him. Even a defensive formation won't be able to protect them. Immediately, the protagonist decided to act and he flew past Lin. Zio Feng flew ahead of everyone, and they were surprised. He immediately summoned a fire talisman and took it in his hand. Flying up to the crocodile, he threw the talisman right into its eye. Immediately there was a strong explosion and it just flew apart. Sissy noted that it wasn't that scary. Zhu asked, "Is this the power of the beast of the foundation stage?" Tai replied in denial, and explained that it was all due to Zio Feng blowing up the talisman given to him by the Sect. The demonic beast did not have time to accumulate the energy for a real explosion. He made a decision so quickly. Such determination even scares him. Lai Fan got even more angry and called the protagonist names. He pointed at him and shouted that he had willfully destroyed his master's ritual talisman and disobeyed orders. He will tell the elders about everything. Lin turned around and noted that Fang had no shame or conscience. The protagonist turned around and replied that he should do as he knows. Lai Fang got even angrier and wanted to say something again, but Tai told Tom to stop. In any case, the appearance of a demonic beast of the foundation stage on the Tian River is something out of the ordinary. They need to report this to the Sect, and everyone agreed. Immediately, the protagonist began to spit blood. Sis flew up to him and grabbed his hand and asked if he was okay. The protagonist replied that everything was fine. "I just suffered a little from the explosion." Lai Fan laughed and noted that Zio is not as strong as he wants to appear. He deserved it and called him a pretender. The protagonist decided to continue on his way and called his sister, because otherwise they would fall behind. After that, we are shown that the protagonist still hasn't stopped bleeding. After that, the guards show us the hall. All 4 of them were standing near the door, and Sis asked why Tai and Xiao Feng hadn't come out yet. She asked Lin if the elder really wanted to punish Brother Xiao. They could explain everything to them and help him. Lin asked her not to worry, because the elder is not so stupid, he will figure everything out. Lai Fan said with anger in his eyes that the protagonist had destroyed the guard badge that the sect had given him, disobeyed orders and put everyone in danger. Yes, he is a real violator. The elder would never let him go just like that. Lin asked Fan if it was his father who taught him to be so petty, and Fan, in turn, got angry and wanted to answer her something. Immediately, Zhang noticed that they were coming out. The door opened and Xiao and Tai appeared. Zhang asked how it went. Lin asked if the elders had punished Junior Xiao. Tai replied that it was quite the opposite. The elder praised Xiao for a long time, and in the end called him worthy of the title of a true disciple. The protagonist laughed and replied that it was because the elder was very wise and understood what was what. Well, and, of course, he does not listen to the opinions of such as some. His words made Fan even more angry. Lin noted that this was good. She asked if he could have a drink with them, and they'll take Sister Lin with them, and Sis blushed a little. The protagonist turned around and, standing on his sword, thanked her for the invitation. But he decided to have a drink sometime next time. He has a couple of urgent things to do and apologized to Lin. He immediately flew away from the temple at high speed. Lin was upset and asked if she thought he was too callous, because he didn't show any interest in them at all. Sissy, a little embarrassed, replied that maybe he already has someone. After that, the protagonist flew somewhere into a closed cave. The protagonist clutched his heart and started spitting blood and told Jan Zion that if she started rampaging now and killed someone, he would never get away with it. The spirit replied that she was just hungry. Besides, that rat-like guy was looking at him very unkindly. He could have been eaten. She didn't think that he would choose to feed her with his blood instead of just letting her kill him. He's really too kind to others. The protagonist replied that she should forget about the teachings of the demonic sects. They don't kill their own people in broad daylight. She flew up to him and stood behind him and said that they were followers of righteous sects, all hypocrites. Jan Zion is not ready to put up with this. She couldn't hold back her bloodlust and just tasted him a little, and he was already writhing in pain. She blushed and asked if maybe she should just drink all his blood. Then he would no longer feel pain and asked how he liked the idea. The protagonist replied that drinking all his blood was like killing a chicken that laid eggs for her. He added that he had a better idea and asked if she would listen. Jan Zion agreed to listen, but said in advance that she was not going to leave his body. The protagonist asked why they couldn't make a deal with her. The girl told him not to dream. Xiao laughed and said that he wanted to say that after signing the contract, he would recognize her as his mistress and put his body at her disposal. Well, if she's not interested, then fine. The girl told him to stop and asked who said she wasn't interested. The protagonist was surprised and asked if she agreed. Jan Zion noted that she thought he was up to something. The protagonist asked what he could do at all. He is just a junior disciple of the Kai cultivation stage who almost died at the hands of a demonic beast of the foundation stage. He needs her strength to survive. It seemed to him that if he accepted her, she would save him in case of danger, and in return he would devote himself entirely to her service and become her diligent vessel. The girl laughed and noted that since he was already saying that, there was nothing to be done about it, and therefore she agreed. She decided to sign the contract as soon as possible and winked at him. Immediately, some seals appeared around her hand. They flew out of it and taking off. The girl said that these were the runes of the conclusion of the contract. The protagonist must draw them with his blood and mentally pronounce his name. After the conclusion of the contract, he must unconditionally obey her. If he disobeys, these runes will consume his soul, and his life will turn into utter hell. He'd better give up all sorts of schemes against her right away, since they won't work on her. The protagonist bit his finger and asked her not to worry, because he had been waiting for this moment for a long time. The protagonist reached for the sword and told her to act. Then he touched the sword and began to draw something with his blood on it. He thought it was a great deal, and Jan Zion was a little surprised. She was already drooling and she didn't understand what was wrong with this guy, but he just had a lot of spiritual energy. She didn't know what kind of technique he was cultivating, but his spiritual power didn't seem to be demonic or the power of a righteous sect master. His spiritual power is so pure and smells delicious. Jan Zion took hold of her face and blushed, adding that from that moment on, all his spiritual energy and himself belonged to her. Immediately, the protagonist took the sword and told it to thicken. The girl was surprised and told him to stop. She did not understand what he had drawn there and what kind of runes these were. The protagonist smiled and asked if she recognized her own runes, because she had shown them to him once. Jan Zion told him to stop and let a certain aura into him. The protagonist easily blocked her attack. Xiao Feng explained that the sword is currently in the process of recognizing a new owner, so he created a barrier protecting it from external interference. This is the will of the sword itself. She, being the spirit of this sword, must submit to his will. The girl, looking at the protective barrier and these runes, realized that this was really a ritual for recognizing a new owner, but she did not understand how. She would never let anyone know about her own runes of submission. Then the sword began to resist. The protagonist was surprised and asked what was going on. Jan Zion laughed and noted that with his supply of blood and spiritual energy, he would never be able to saturate the sword that cuts through many spirits, and therefore she advised him to just give up. The protagonist heard her and smiled. He pricked his finger and said that all he needed to do was add some blood. He grabbed the sword with both hands and began to saturate the sword. Jan Zion told him to stop, because he would draw out all his essence and blood from him, and asked if he really decided to die. The protagonist replied that if he could not overcome even such an obstacle, then how could he fix everything that he still regrets? Immediately, his face changed and his eyes turned red. A huge oppressive aura flew out of his body. After that, the protagonist fell to his knees, and losing consciousness, he noted that he had succeeded. A moment later, he fell to the ground, and Jan Zion began to fly up to him. She noted that no one could ever force her to reveal the secret of her own runes. She could only do it of her own free will. However, she didn't understand why she didn't remember it. She stretched out her fingers to his head and thought that the protagonist had no idea what he would do, even though he's unconscious right now. But she doesn't have a chance to get rid of the binding runes. She called him a dumbass and didn't understand what had happened between them in the past. After that, we are shown the protagonist's past life, and there he sat on his throne, and Jan Zion was next to him. The girl noted to him that it seemed to her that he might not survive this battle, and she asked if he had any last wish that she could fulfill. The protagonist replied to Jan Zion that they had been fighting together for many years, but she had been faithful to her pride all this time and did not recognize him as her master. He asked how about he become her true master if he still survives this battle. Jan Zion noted that even the demon lord himself would not joke at such a moment. Nevertheless, she liked this deal and began to draw symbols on his hand. She said that these are the runes of recognition of the owner of her family. If he survived, then maybe she would give him a chance to become her master. The protagonist still died and apologized, because he realized that he would realize this deal only in the next life.